My dear brothers and sisters, it looks like everybody wants simple and easy answers for their questions. We have so many questions and we all love to have easy and simple answers. Well, some answers you can get in your Google. Like some of the answers that you want to search for, you go to the Google it, and then you get the answers. Like what day of the week I was born, it will tell you. It is absolutely amazing how much information we get out from all the connectivity that we have in the internet. However, looking at all that aspects that are there in the Google, remember that there are some answers that cannot be found in the Google. Like if your wife comes and says to you, right on your face and with your straight face you have to answer, how do I look with my lovely jeans I'm wearing? With your straight face you cannot answer. And answers to the main questions as we see of life cannot be Googled also. Like for example, why do I exist? Or why does evil exist with us? Or why there is evil in the world? Or even, how should I raise my very naughty kid? All these cannot be answered in the Google. To have a simple life, we also need answers. For this reason, we see the Pharisees who were there, in a way, were cornered by Jesus. Why? Because Jesus silenced the Sadducees about the question of resurrection. That's just the previous passage. And after silencing the Sadducees, the Pharisees now get upset. Is he going to silence us? And therefore they come, because they all know the Hebrew law, and they come to ask a question. In a way, trying to Google with Jesus Christ, saying, what is the greatest commandment? And well, you see, there were 613 Hebrew scriptural laws which are there for the Jewish community to follow. Having 613 laws, naturally you and I will also say, among all these 613, which is the greatest? And therefore it was an easy question for the Pharisees to come to Jesus and ask, because they wanted to see what is the answer from this master who's trying to become popular, silencing the Sadducees and now up against the Pharisees and the teachers of the law. And therefore they come with this question, what is the greatest commandment? And look at Jesus, how he responds to the lawyer's question. He quotes from two important law of Torah. The first one is from the book of Deuteronomy, where we see in chapter 6, verse 5, the Shema Israel, which says, God is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. And that was not just the one commandment, the greatest. He goes a little further to tell them the second quotation from the book of Leviticus chapter 19 verse 18, which says, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Now this is very important for each and every one of us to see how Jesus explains this maybe a tough question in a very simple way by giving them the Shema Israel and the Levitical, the law of the priests. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. And that is the reason why we see we cannot just be good to our neighbor only, or sometimes we cannot just be good to our neighbor who is very close to us, only for 1 day or 2 days, but this commandment is for all, always. You shall love your neighbor as yourself is always to love. Similarly, we know to love God with all our heart, with all our soul, with all our mind is to love Him always. Therefore, this commandment makes us feel that we hang on this law. Because Jesus himself said, all the laws that are there hang on these two laws. Therefore, let it be the Ten Commandments, let it be the Torah, all of these commandments, all of these laws come under these two commandments, love of God and love of neighbor. Well, my dear friends, this was not an easy answer for the lawyer to understand. Why? Because Jesus was not in a particular law, not even two particular laws, but he answered them by giving them that this law will bring the presence of God in you. That is important for us. Therefore, we find the love of God and love of neighbor bringing the presence of God. If the presence of God is there for each and every one of us, my dear friend, we should be contented in life and our spiritual life is good. Like, for example, we find one of those great poets, Maya Angelou, who said, I want to become a Christian because that makes me whole, that makes me full. Her point was Christianity is an ongoing process of becoming the presence of God in our lives. Therefore, you find every step that we take in our lives, every move that we make is to become a Christian day after day. And how? By these two commandments. Every day God uses people to find Him. God uses some people in my life to find Him. God uses some people in your life so that you find God. It happened to a young girl, my dear friends. She was totally disturbed because of college life and totally disturbed. She was not able to understand and she would always say, I don't know if God exists, the essence of God. All this disturbed her a lot. And she could not find any meaning in God. But she had a grandmother. Her grandmother was a very spiritual lady. She knew that. And therefore she said, I better go spend some time with my grandmother. She goes and spends time with her grandmother. And there the grandmother is there. And she says, well, grandma, I don't find any presence of God. I don't find Him there. What should I do? Well, I'm totally depressed about God. I'm totally depressed about my life. Where will I find God? And the grandmother was so spiritual. She said, well, my child, all that you have to do is just close your eyes and pray to God. Close your eyes and pray to God. And then this young girl, knowing that her grandmother was a spiritual lady, closed her eyes and started praying to God. And she got engrossed in that prayer. And she was closing her eyes and praying. Her grandmother was doing her normal work. And as she finished her work, she brought a cup of milk for her and then placed her hand upon her shoulder. As soon as she placed her hand upon her shoulder, immediately the young girl said, the Lord has touched me, the Lord has touched me, the Lord has touched me. And she put her hands on those hands and he said, it doesn't look like the Lord's hands, it looks like my grandmother's hand. It looked like my grandmother's hand. She opened her eyes and the grandmother said, this is how God touches you. This is exactly how God touches you. Don't expect something great to happen. Remember, God touches you by another person who's next to you, who's living with you, whom you least disregard. And therefore, don't expect something great to happen to you, but rather God comes in a very tangible way, in a very simple way, in a very subtle way, so that you recognize it. It may be difficult to recognize my God, whom I believe, in my neighbor. Why? Because I have framed them in such a high level, in an abstract level. Because of that abstract essence of God, I am not able to touch my neighbor and see the presence of God in him or her. Therefore, remember, my dear friend, if the gospel tells us that this is what you have to be, that you should love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and to love neighbor as you love yourself. It means that you have to bring God's presence in your life, and your neighbors will bring that God's presence into your life as well. For us, my dear brothers and sisters, finally I'd like to tell you about a handsome young man. A handsome young man. And because he was very handsome, a pretty young girl fell in love with him. But this pretty young girl was from a very, very rich family. A very well-to-do family. She was almost a film star. She had everything in her house. But looking at this handsome young man, she also knew that this handsome young man, carrying himself so well, is from a very high-level background, maybe well-to-do and all that. They fell in love with each other, got married, and this pretty little lady went to his house. And when she went to live with him, she realized that he lives in a very simple house. She entered the door, she found the drawing room very simple, and as she entered into the bedroom, she found a double cot there, a very simple. Being a very tall man, he had a teapot next to his bed so that he could stretch his leg on that teapot, and he was such a simple man. And looking at all this, the garden so simple, everything so simple, but he looked so handsome. He was carrying riches in his life. It looks like that. And this woman, being from a very well-to-do family, not able to understand why the simple person was living such a simple life, she really fell in love with him. Why did she fall in love? She loved him for what? Because she liked it. She liked that the way he lived. She loved what he liked. He liked a simple way of living. Even though being handsome, having everything in life, he lived a simple life. And she loved what he liked. And this is exactly what Jesus wants from each and every one of us, that we love him because he liked us. Finally, my dear brothers and sisters, the love of God is the love of neighbor, is that you do it with all your heart. Put your whole self, with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. Love God. With all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Amen. Let us all stand for the creed. Let us all together say, I believe in one God,